Well, hello everybody. Thanks for joining us on what is in the UK an incredibly warm Friday evening. We're going through the middle of a heat wave over here. So I was just saying to Izzy before we started, we've never been good at dealing with extremes, either good or bad weather. So it's the usual panicked response in the UK to any form of extreme weather. Hope you're going to enjoy tonight. I certainly looking forward to it. We've spoken on a good number of occasions now with Izzy. We've done a couple of podcasts, and the feedback from the podcasts has been really incredible. The idea seems to have really resonated with people, and I think what we've found out as we've communicated, Izzy, together, that a lot of the ideas that we've had seem to fit really quite nicely together. And as we were talking about before we even got started tonight, I think there's such an incredible opportunity going forward if you're a player to explore brain compatible learning and brain compatible performance. But I think from a coaching perspective, there is an incredible opportunity in the weeks, months, and years ahead as we understand more about the brain. I think you've said in one of the podcasts, it's the golden age of neuroscience, that it's been around for a while, but the deeper understandings of how it applies to our daily lives are only becoming more apparent now. You know, I've certainly found the concepts, the way that you've framed things in terms of red, yellow, and green, I think is just such a useful model for people to use, and it takes away a lot of the verbiage that we have. You know, words like pressure, anxiety, all those things that really don't lead anywhere. But I think with the as you'll talk about tonight, I'm sure, with the color scheme, it's something really practical that you can apply. And I've always been so keen with the Mind Factor, that the tools that I share with people and the approaches at heart, the main thing is that they're actually practical and they're applicable, because theory is nice, research is nice, but I think most people just want to play better golf, and if you're a coach, you want to get more out of your students. So, Izzy, I know you've got a few ideas to run through tonight. If
Sure.
anybody, as we're going through the session tonight, if you've got any questions, if you want to put them in the chat box, we'll get a chance at the end. If you come onto the call and you're not on mute for whatever reason, I keep having to remute people. If you could just notice that and just put yourself on mute till we've got to the end. But Izzy, thanks very much for joining us, and I know you've got a whole catalogue of interesting areas to talk about.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon and good evening from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am so delighted to be here with all of you, Karl. I've thoroughly enjoyed our collaboration over these last few months and look forward to much more. Thank all of you for making time to be here. Karl and I talked before the call, and I said, hey, this is so cool to do a webinar as opposed to a podcast, because in a podcast, it's just Karl and I talking. So why don't we take advantage of the fact that it's a live environment, and let's actually take questions from you. You guys are coaches or players or instructors or leaders or performance coaches, and so each one of you is at a different point in your journey of learning and growth and life and needs and those kinds of things. So in lieu of giving a one size fits all, I would really welcome, and because there's so many of you, unfortunately, we can't do it verbally. So the format that I'd like to follow is that I have 10 topics. That sounds like a lot, but I'm only going to spend 2 minutes on each topic, and I'll invite Karl to share a thought after each topic. What I'd like for you to do is, based on the topic that I share, go ahead and either write down yourself or put in the chat window if you want me to go deeper. So imagine that you're reading an article online or on a newspaper. I'm going to give you the headline and I'll give you the first paragraph, right? And then any one of these 10 topics that resonates with you, something that you want to learn more about, or you need evidence or data or the neuroscience on it, I am more than happy to dig as deep as you want. That way, this is about you. Otherwise, it'll be like reading one of my books that is out there. So let's get going with that format. Let me go through each topic. It'll take us about 20, 25 minutes, I'm guessing, to go through all of these topics. And like I said, whichever one you want to dig deeper on, just write it down, and Karl's going to be tracking everything, and I'm more than happy to dig deep. So the first topic is really to talk about, the brain TrackMan. I promise you, this was not part of my master plan. This was a function of the technology that was available. So we are truly living in the golden age of neuroscience. And what I mean by that is that there is technology that was invented about 5, 6 years ago that really changed everything. So we have known for about 60, 70 years that the brain has electricity in it. This is not new information. We've measured it using EEG. EEG is, let's just say, it's the noise in our head, right? And what happened in the last 5 to 6 years that's different from 60 years ago when we started measuring EEG was, in order to measure EEG, you typically had to go to a doctor's office. And frankly, you had to go to a psychiatric doctor's office and, put a helmet on your head and have 50 wires coming out of your head, and you just sit down on a chair very still, and you'd be asked certain questions, and we would measure you on a graph. So what changed was about, 6, 7 years ago, instead of that big helmet, you could put some type of a hat or a lobe, or a device, and it was now wireless. So that's number one. So wireless means that you don't have to sit on a chair. You can have the device on your head when you're putting, when you're chipping, when you're playing golf, when you're shooting a basketball, when you're doing anything, when you're trying to solve a problem, when you're in the middle of a heated argument. And we can now track all the brain waves, not just from like a general weather, but specifically, what is your brain doing to make sense of the stimuli that you have? And so when I first started, I'm being completely honest with you, almost 70% of what I know, I discovered by accident. I was not looking for it. I just said, oh my gosh, the brain waves have changed when this situation presents itself. So I continue to discover that. So I have done close to 12,000 brain scans on golfers while they are executing a shot, whether it's a putt or a chip, and just discovered just amazing things. So the first of the 10 topics that I want to cover with you is the fact that there have been so many learnings. If you think of the TrackMan or any device that measures how you hit a ball, before that, we didn't know how many RPMs were in a ball flight. We didn't know the angle of attack. We didn't know club path. We could guess, right? We were guessing based on what we saw, but we didn't really know. I mean, how can you possibly know when something is happening so fast in the golf swing? Well, if you think the golf swing is fast, I can assure you that the brain is probably 200 times faster than the neuromuscular function. It's happening even faster. So the beauty of the brain TrackMan that I invented is that it really allows me to take guessing. I know now without guessing if someone misses a putt, someone misses a chip, what was the real root cause? We see, oh, you came outside to in, or you hit it fat, or you hit it thin, or something. We see that, but we can't see what's going on in the brain. And the brain said, don't leave it short. Don't hit it too hard. I just made a bogey on the last hole. I can see that. And therefore, we can fix the real problem. Instead of giving you another chipping lesson, I know you missed that shot because your brain waves were spiking, which means you were thinking of something else. So that's topic number one, is the technology and the neuroscience that's just giving us amazing data that I'm still processing, if I'm being honest with you. The second topic is what the brain controls. And this, as instructors of physical sports, target sports, and I'll pause after this, Karl. So the brain controls 3 things in target sports or in neuromuscular coordination. Number one, it controls muscle sequencing. The muscles do not control that. Muscles do not have memory. I know that is counterintuitive, but muscles have no cognitive function. If I said to you, bones have memory, you would laugh at me, like, bones? Like, it's a hard thing. If I say a ligament or a tendon had memory, you would laugh at me. Well, in the same way, you should laugh at the fact that muscles have memory, because they don't. they are a slave to the brain. They get their instructions from the brain. So it is the brain that controls the sequence, whether it's a putting, chipping, or a full swing, or a full swing sequence. The brain is responsible for that sequence. The second thing that the brain is responsible for is the force that's applied to the ball, whether it's a putt or a chip or a full swing. The muscles execute the force, but they don't decide how to hit something any more than a bone does or a ligament does. And the last thing that the brain does in terms of golf is target. So a target is not seen or held by muscles or the bone. It's seen by the eyes and it's held by the brain. All right. So, and golf is very unique in that your eyes are not on the target where you want the ball to finish while you're hitting the ball, because your eyes are down here. So that makes golf a little bit complex. So what I found is that when the brain waves are green, and that's our language, which means the brain waves are low, alpha or theta brain waves, 5 to 15 hertz, then the sequence, the force, and the ability of a golfer to hold the target in their head while they're hitting it, sending it where they see it's going to go, are all up to par with their skill level. The second that those brainwaves go high, then one, two, or all three of those are going to be off. That's why, when our brainwaves are very high, which is pressure, the sequencing, one thing goes off. It's too quick of a transition. The hips move too fast, or any other version. Or you hit the ball much harder than you want to, or much softer than you want to. Those are all functions of the brain. They're not functions of the muscle. But we see the result. We see it was scald, or it was hit too soft, or the putt came up short, or you hit it too hard, or you flew the green, or you hit it in the water. We see the result of that. But again, the brain has allowed us, the brain TrackMan has really allowed us to, conclusively, without question, say that the brain controls muscle sequencing, force, and target. So let me do a quick pause there before I go through the other topics, and Karl, see if you have any comments, and then I'll keep going.
Yeah, it just ties in with actually one of the questions that's been posed already, Izzy, that you talked about with the brain TrackMan, that you'd notice when people have a practice stroke that the TrackMan, brain TrackMan spikes, the brainwave frequency increases. And the question was, does that happen in the full swing as well? If somebody's having a practice swing in the full swing, working on swing mechanics, working on various positions, does the same phenomenon occur in practice swings through the green?
100%, 100%. And again, this is so counterintuitive. And if you had told me this 7 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you, because it's so counterintuitive. Most pre-shot routines are counterproductive. Remember, the role of a pre-shot routine should be, do I have a target in my head and do I know what to do? Sometimes that happens in an instant, and sometimes you need to spend more time to get the target and decide based on your lie and the wind and the condition. So I find that people have become slaves to their pre-shot routines. In other words, they're going through something to go through it, as opposed to, I have the target in my head, I know what to do. And I would have never believed it, but I found out, oh my gosh, the guy's going through the same routine and his brain waves are spiking. Let me share two human factors with you. 65% of the time, this is on average, this is not even in athletic performance, 65% of the time, the mind is wandering. On this call that we are having, 65% of the time on this call, your brain is going to go somewhere else. You will not be where you physically are. And roughly it takes 3 seconds on average for the mind to wander. And so you can imagine how many 3-second increments there are in a pre-shot routine, right? So many times, you're right, Karl, even in the full swing, I have found, again, I would have never believed, I would not have believed my own self that I would say, oh, the pre-shot routines are not mostly helpful and you need to modify them, making the king is always the target. Do I have a target and can I hold that target in my head? That's it.
I think I think what that becomes then is, instead of a pre-shot routine, it becomes a flexible pre-shot creation, doesn't it? Where you're fluid
Yes.
enough to go with what, if you have that target and your brain is saying, let's go with this, you're in green, is giving yourself permission to do that, as opposed to what we've all been sold is the idea, if I go through this series of steps, it'll actually protect me from distraction. And what you're reinforcing is actually creating distraction.
Yeah. The number one distraction, I work with a lot of professional golfers, and I had several of them tell me that in a PGA Tour event, one of the biggest distractions is the porta-john doors, like where you go to the bathroom. Like when they close, they boom, they just slam. Like it's a very loud pop. And they have those throughout the course because you can't have bathrooms everywhere. But we always think of a distraction as something external. Someone yells in my backswing. So just think about that. If you're hitting a ball, putting, chipping, full swing, and someone yells in your backswing, what are the odds that you're going to mishit that ball? Extremely high, right? What if I told you that the number one distraction to our own, to ourselves is our own brain? It's not external. What if your own brain on your downswing says, don't go left? Nobody heard it, but that is just as bad as someone saying "Baba Booey" or something in your downswing, and something like, whoa. So the brain is what our own brain, our own monologue is the biggest distraction to ourselves. And I've seen so many times on the downswing, the brain spike. And I'll ask the player, hey, something happened. They're like, no, nothing. I said, dude, like it's here, look, something happened. Like, yeah, I told myself, don't go left. And suddenly something in the swing goes off. So this is what I mean, is that the brain trackman doesn't lie. I mean, it's hard data. Like, I know there's a spike. I know something negative has happened for sure.
And I think, again, looking at the actual golf swing itself, that the movement to produce a golf shot, whilst it seems to be over in an instant when you hit a golf ball, from a brain perspective, it's an eternity, isn't it? From taking the club back all the way to the top and all the way down, it's an eternity of option for the brain to be distracted.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is a good segue to the next point, which is why I believe, in my humble opinion, and I don't work with golfers, I work with athletes in all target sports. So I have worked with basketball players, lacrosse players, soccer players, baseball pitchers, NASCAR drivers. I work with all kinds of athletes. And I kid you not, I'm not biased, but I found golf to be the most mentally tough sport, and therefore, from a mental health perspective, the most dangerous sport. And again, I don't use these terms lightly. So let me tell you why. First of all, it's a non-reactionary sport, right? So things aren't moving, and it's an individual sport. So you cannot blame a teammate like in other sports. There are no external factors. No one is playing defense against you. No one's trying to stop you, or no one has hit a shot that you have to react to. Secondly, or thirdly, it's a cumulative score. In tennis, you can lose the first 2 sets and you can come back and win the next 3 sets and you've won, right? But in golf, if you make a double bogey on the 3rd hole, that's going to count towards your score. And our brain absolutely, absolutely knows that. The third thing is, when we mishit a shot, the brain begins to wander even more. And, one of the other points that I said is, if I were to ask each one of you, and I don't know what your backgrounds are, and I said, hey, what is the number one cause of poor putting, especially putts inside 10 feet? I'm guessing many of you will talk about, your putting stroke, where you hit the ball, the line, the speed, and all those kinds of things. And yes, those are variables, but they don't even come close to the number one cause of poor putting, especially inside 10 feet, which is your own mind wandering. That is by far, in those 12,000 brain scans that I've done, I have seen more spikes just before a putt is hit than in any other part of the game. And when that spike occurs, whatever you read, okay, the ball's going to go one cup left to right, it's now lost. And so now you're hitting the ball without a target in your head. And how can you hit anything without a target in your head? Where are you hitting it to? So it has to be crystal clear. And we aren't teaching as instructors, and I don't know how many of you are actual golf instructors, but we are not teaching people how to deal with the number one variable. Like I said, the number one variable of poor putting is the brain's ability to wander. In other words, we are not teaching the brain how to not wander, especially in that 10-second period as you're over the ball and you're about to putt that ball or about to chip that ball. Because in putting and in chipping, in short game, the brain knows, your brain knows and my brain knows that things are about to get final. If I miss a tee shot and it's in the right rough or in the woods, my brain knows it's not final unless it's out of bounds. Even if it's out of bounds, I still have a shot. I can still punch it out. I can still get up and down. But you missed a putt, you missed a putt. Right? Now it's final. And our brain knows that. And I've seen so many, like literally hundreds, maybe even thousands, I don't know, I haven't counted, of spikes while people are over the ball. So I see players of all levels go around the green with their routine. And like I said, most routines, especially in the short game, are harming them because they're creating a bigger window for the mind to wander. And I always say your routine should be, do I have a target? As soon as you have a target, you're done with your routine, go to the ball and hold that target. That's it. When you have a target and certain putts, remember, unlike basketball or soccer, in basketball, it's the same hoop in the same location. But in putting, you're over 18 geographical locations. Every putt that you're going to hit is a different geospatial situation. So the target is going to be different. But as soon as you have a target, as soon as you know, okay, this is what it's going to do, at that point, if the goal should be, how can I keep my brain from wandering? Let me go to the ball, not quickly, because quickly is the opposite. It's going to hurt you. So don't rush. But how can I now hold the target in my head so that when I'm hitting the ball without looking at the target, it's going to where I want to? That can be taught. And that is the skill that especially putts inside 10 feet. To me, I've seen it over and over again. So when people fly in, I have a putting studio outside. I have never changed anyone's grip, putter, stroke, technique. I'm not qualified to do that, frankly. All I tried to do is I teach them exactly what I taught you, which is when you have a target, let me teach you how to hold it in your head. And holding it means you've shut the doors of the mind wandering. And suddenly their stroke becomes pure. It's magical. I never expected that to be it. And then the last comment, and then I'll pause again, is the other accidental discovery that I made. And I kid you not, this was probably the biggest surprise of the Brain Track Man. I learned, and the first few times it happened, I thought it was an anomaly. The most expensive shot in golf, cognitively, is a missed makeable putt. The spike in the brain waves is equivalent to a traumatic event. What does that mean? So let's say that somebody misses a 3-foot putt. All of us can make a 3-foot putt. It's not a physical thing. As they leave the green and go to the next tee box, I have seen brain waves go as high as 70, 80, 90, 100 hertz. To give you context of what that is like somebody getting a news that a loved one has passed away. Just think about that. In terms of the brain, so if God forbid, if someone that you love passes away, think of all the things that your brain is going to process. How could this have happened? This is so sad. I can't believe this. I just talked to them yesterday. All the things. I just lost to my mom a few months ago in May. So I'm kind of, that's a very real thing with me. I'm still dealing with it. I still find myself thinking about my mom at odd situations. But that level of noise is generated because the brain feels like, oh, I just gave one away. I should make this, like there was no skill required. I have to make it up somewhere. Or it's unbelievable how expensive a missed makeable putt is. And I can guarantee you, literally 100% guarantee that something in the next shot, so the next tee shot, the sequence, the force, or the target, or all three is going to be lost. If you go watch golf, and I encourage you, watch it on TV, go watch it in person, and wait until someone misses a makeable putt and then watch them on the next tee shot. I can virtually guarantee you that that tee shot is going to be off.
But the interesting thing about that is for everybody listening in tonight, we've all seen this so many times, that somebody will miss a short makeable putt. Not much will be said about that, but then they'll go to the next tee, they'll block it right, pull it left or whatever. And then the analysis in the booth will be about that golf swing, and there will be some story made up about why it went left or right, relating to how the golf swing has suddenly changed. No reference point to what's happened 5 minutes earlier on the green and the spike in the brain frequency.
That's right. That's right. The other thing, and this is a good segue to one of my other points, which is that, again, another accidental discovery is that I have found out, and again, this is counterintuitive, and I'm just a scientist. I'm telling you what my research and data is showing. There's no judgment here. I have found that post-shot routines are more important than pre-shot routines. Let me explain that. A pre-shot routine is fairly clear to do. What is the lie? What is the wind? What's the yardage? And what's the shot that I have to hit? It's obvious what you have to do. So what I found was that when I taught people how to, get to alpha, theta, get to green, and they still hit a bad shot, and then they tried those same techniques after the bad shot, those techniques no longer worked. And the reason they did not work was because their baseline EEG just went up because of that bad shot. Now, I told you what the most expensive shot was, which is a missed makeable shot, but that doesn't mean that's the only expensive shot. That's the most expensive one. But there are many expensive shots, like you could shank a shot, or you could pull something way left, or you could say, okay, let's not hit it in the water on the left, and you hit it in the water on the left. So there is a judgment. Judgment is a cliche. So there is our brain, I ask people, do you have a post-shot routine? Almost everybody says no. And I said, well, you're wrong. You do have a post-shot routine. You just don't call it that, because after every shot, your brain is judging it. That's your post-shot routine, is the default judgment that you have given that shot. Now think about this. Even Jack Nicklaus said, I only hit one good shot around. I don't know if that's true, but that's what he said. So that means the overwhelming majority of the shots that a player is going to hit are not going to be exactly how they want it. That means your brain is going to judge, evaluate, all those kinds of things. That means the brainwaves have gone up. And if the brainwaves have gone up, that means that your ability to then execute the next shot, pre-shot routine, has become much, much lower. So I find that the efficacy, the integrity of a pre-shot routine is in large part based on how well you did your post-shot routine from the last shot. I would have never known that. How would I have possibly known that if I didn't see all these spikes after a shot? And I realized that, almost every shot that a player hits, even sometimes if it's a good one to me, like I work with two players and they hit it right in the middle. I was like, oh, great shot. Like, nah, I was trying to draw that and I faded that. Like, you just faded that 320 yards in the fairway and you're saying, nah, that's not good. And so his brainwaves are now higher. But to me, I was like, oh my God, I'd be on cloud 9. So it's relative. There's no standard of what a good shot is, because it's based on whatever expectation you have. And so that means that there is going to be a spike after every shot. And if you have a spike, depending on the level of a judgment or surprise, then your next shot is going to be impacted. So the most expensive one, like I said, is a missed makeable putt. But below that, there are many, many more. You want to hit a fade and you draw the ball. You're still on the green, but you did the opposite of what you wanted to do. Now your brain is thinking, how did I do that? Was my face open? Did my hips move too fast? Now, where is your mind now? I mean, those are 20, 30, 40 hertz brainwaves when you need 5 to 10. And it can take up to 20 minutes sometimes just for a small spike to go back down. So compare this to a life trauma. like my mom passed away again. I don't know. I mean, I'm in my 50s, but I don't know if I'll recover from that. Like, how do you recover from your mom gone forever? So the timing of recovery from something that your brain is judging can take forever. My son plays junior golf. He's 16 years old. Every single tournament that he has ever played, every round, I have seen it over and over and over and over and over again. Like a guy will be going on very well, and the first bad swing or the first bad hole, and then the next 3, 4 holes are shot. All of us have seen that. And that's basically what I mean is that, each person's brainwave spikes differently, which is why the brain fragment can be so powerful, is because we can now put it on each person. There was one kid whose dad had me look, I don't work with juniors very much, but he had me look at his kid's brain. And when I saw his kid's brain, I told him, your son does not have a golf issue. He has a life issue. His baseline was in the 40s. He can't focus on anything. It's just showing up in golf. And then even his instructor said to me, like I have to tell him every 3 minutes, hey, pay attention. So I said, you are putting him in a sport where he is going to be miserable. So he needs help with his life because this person is not going to be a healthy, productive, mentally healthy person because his baseline is so high. He's going to overreact to everything in life. And I've seen that.
I think, sorry to interrupt, Izzy. I think what it shows for everybody here tonight, whether you're a player and certainly as a coach, the tremendous opportunity here, because in the last 10 or 15 years, I have seen more movement towards trying to help people in terms of what they think before the shot. That will take place on a range. Coaches will work on pre-shot routines. There's still the 90%, 95% of the emphasis is on the movement itself. But actually what we're talking about here is a tremendous coaching opportunity in the future to actually look at people's responses and routines post-shot as not only a great way to actually get them to play better golf, but actually the whole experience of the game itself and the relationship that they have with the game, because I think the relationship with the game is a direct correlation with your post-shot routines.
Yeah, look, I think golf is a mental health risk. I mean, it pains me to say this because I love the game. And for me, it's like a spa, but it is a mental health risk because so much goes on. I leave the course with guys that shoot 2 or 3 more than they want to, and they say, "Oh, dinner's just going to be horrible tonight." And I'm like, "Really?" But it is a mental health risk, and I don't know that you can be a coach, a golf instructor. I don't know if there's some of you on this call, or a performance coach, and ignore the mental health side of it. When you are giving a lesson and say someone hits a bad shot, I would stop and I would observe them. If they're reacting a certain way in your lesson, imagine how they're going to react on the course when the brain is moving so fast and the consequences are so much higher. So I will tell you that it is a privilege when people come to you and say, hey, help me figure this out. And whether it's through the front door or through the back door, I encourage you to not abdicate your responsibility to become a mental health coach. I just don't think that performance and mental health can be separated anymore. They're one and the same thing. They truly are. And look at Michael Phelps, look at Simone Biles, look at so many athletes that have come out. Simone Biles, arguably the greatest gymnast, sat out 2 events in the last Olympics. These are the greatest athletes who've trained their entire life that's saying, oh my gosh, there's too much noise in my head. Like there's so much judgment over here. And so I respectfully, like from the bottom of my heart, I encourage you to learn about mental health, become an expert at it. No, I take that back. You don't have to be an expert at it. And you don't need a PhD and you don't need a graduate degree. You just need to have a model with which you can help these people. And I find that if you can help them with the mental health side of it, oh my gosh, their performance improves. Isn't that funny?
Just on the model that you have, is it with red, yellow, and green? I think to change it from lots of words and descriptions to something that everybody can grab hold of as a concept, that you're in red, bring it down, is such a useful way to take away all of the cliches. And would you recommend that it would be a good daily practice to kind of check in with your mental temperature throughout a normal working day? Forget
Yes,
golf, looking at the whole picture of life.
absolutely. And first of all, red, green, yellow is a non-judgmental language. I'm not saying you look sad or mad or glad or depressed, or you look anxious or you look happy or you look glad. And red, green, yellow is a traffic light. Everyone in this world sees a traffic light. Red is stop, green is go, yellow is be caution. It was a coincidence. This was not by design, that red happens to be the universal symbol of heat, like temperature heat. If you look at the radar in a weather, when something is about to happen, it's red. And if there's storms, it's yellow. And so on the far left side is blue, which is ice. So the brain has heat because it has electricity. Electricity generates heat. And so when the brain has lots of brain waves, quantity and intensity is high, the brain is actually not red, but the color that we have accepted to depict heat is red. So if you are red, which means the cliches would be, I'm stressed out, I'm under pressure, I'm about to choke, what do you do with those cliches? But if you're red, you can say, oh, well, let's get to green. It's a non-judgmental way for all of us to talk about something that's very sensitive. If I say, oh, you look mad, I don't look mad. What are you saying? I'm fine. There's so many defense mechanisms that all of us subconsciously have. So, it's all in my book. It's on the jiragolf.com website. There are a lot of information over there. So I want you to know that, this is not me. This is not Dr. Justice. Like I don't have an ego associated with this. I am a slave to the science. If I discover something tomorrow that contradicts what I said today, I will raise my hand like any good scientist would and say, oh, we've discovered new evidence. So this is not about me. I didn't invent red, green, yellow. I just took the research. I took the fact that I saw brainwaves were spiking after a mismakeable putt. I'm giving you hard data, hard evidence. The other thing I was just going to go over quickly is course management. And in my opinion, there is a missing component, and I find even at the professional level, I just helped a guy last week on the Canadian tour. He Monday qualified, he shot 65, and he Monday qualified, and he got in, and he ended up finishing 19th, actually, and got into next week's tournament. And he had been playing golf for a long time, and his problem was he made as many bogeys as he did birdies. So he was a very good player, but there were always enough bogeys to dilute his score. So when I asked him how he was making mistakes and the decision-making that he was using, it was all the same. Well, I look at the lie, I look at the wind, and then I hit the shot. And I was like, really? And I said, look, so this is the course management system that you can use with red, green, yellow. If your brain is green, that means you can be aggressive to an aggressive target. Why? Because green means your brain waves are low, and those three things, sequence, force, and target, are going to be optimized. So if you're green, it doesn't matter what the lie is or what the wind is. Hit the shot that you're capable of hitting. If you're yellow, that means your brain waves are high. They're not red. And so you need to be conservative, but to an aggressive target. So that's where the decade model can come in. Look at your dispersion and play your dispersion. If you're red, it is a virtual guarantee that your sequence, your force, and or your target is going to be off. So you need to play the most conservative shot. And so what this kid told me, he's 65, he said, he always struggled when he was playing, okay, shall I go for it or shall I not? And so I said, okay, look at your last 3 to 5 scores, shots. Was there any yellow or red in there? If in your last 3 to 5 shots, and in the Jira app that we have, there's actually a brain, thermometer. It'll tell you what your brain temperature is. So to me, this is the most effective way to manage course management. Yes, your lie dictates what kind of shot you hit. Yes, the wind dictates. Yes, the yardage dictates. But above all of those is your brain temperature. And how do you know what your brain temperature is? It's like I said, look at the cost of your last 3 to 5 shots. If you hit boom, 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 you're doing very well, then the next shot, go for it. Hit the most aggressive shot to the most aggressive target. And so that's what this kid did. He said, okay, I just asked myself, let me think about my last 3 shots. And if there's a bad one in there, and there's a scale 1 to 10, if there's a bad one in there, okay, I'll play conservative. And if there's a red one, I'm going to punch out. I'm going to take the hazard out. I'm going to lay to the front edge of the green. I will take all of the trouble out. So he's making the same number of birdies, but his bogeys have gone down. Just by saying, I'm going to make course management decisions based on what my brain temperature is. The two things, other things that I want to talk about, and then we'll pause, and then we'll go through all of your questions, is practice. And again, the old Ben Hogan cliche of practice makes perfect and dig it out of the dirt is simply not true anymore. Again, counterintuitive. The mind wanders every 3 seconds. 65% of the time, you are not where your body is. Right? So I have found that when people spend hours and hours on the range or short game practice area or chipping, which you would think is a good thing. Like I said, I have a son, a junior golfer, leave it to me to say, whoa, don't go practice too much. So what I found is that if you hit the same shot 3 times, so let's say you have a 7-iron and you're hitting the same shot. By the time you get to the third one, if it's the same situation, the same lie, and the same target, your mind has already wandered. And then you're going to hit a poor shot. And then you're going to end up fixing the wrong thing. Oh, I pulled it. Yeah, you pulled it, but you pulled it for the reason that your mind was wandering. And trust me, when you're trying to execute something, neuromuscular, a performance, it's not going to wander to a good place. It's going to wander to a negative place, which means your brain waves have gone up. So your people are creating problems on the range because they're fixing the wrong problem. So 3 balls maximum of the same kind of shot is it. And if you look at putting, and Karl, you and I had a big laugh about this on the last podcast, where you go to the putting green on a Monday, Tuesday, on the practice screen, and you'll see 500 training aids. And almost all of them are static. They've taken their training aid and it's in one location. And I will tell you from a neuroscience perspective, they're all ineffective because of the fact that the mind wanders every 3 seconds and overall 65% of the time. So they're doing something for the sake of doing something, as opposed to you're really imprinting something in your brain. And then the last thing I was going to cover with all of you, and then I'll pause, was as a coach, and again, I would have never known this, but you really have to rethink how it is that you are teaching someone. So what I found is using the brain trackman is that there are really 3 stages. The first one is the obvious one, which is learning. You are teaching someone something. That's the least powerful one. I know you don't want to hear this. I know you don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear it. What you communicate to one of your clients is the least important of the 3. All you've done is taken knowledge from your head and put it in their head. You've just changed the file from one hard drive to another hard drive. There's no magic in that. The second stage is that whatever you transfer to them has to be stored in their brain. And guess what? That storage in the world that we live in today only happens at one time and one time only, and that's at night. Why? Because during the course of the day, the brain is consuming way too much stimuli. There's too much competition for what you have taught them. And then the third stage is their brain's ability to retrieve it when it counts. What is the value of you teaching them something if the moment that they need it, they cannot remember it? There's no value in that. So I don't think that you can be a coach and say, oh, I've taught someone something that they need to know. That's just the first third of it. If you have a fantastic lesson between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., I'm making this up, right? 1 hour. I will tell you, and let's say that it goes amazing. They have an aha moment and like, oh, thank you, coach. I love you. This was so amazing. I'm hitting great shots now, or I'm making all the putts, or whatever it is that you do. I will tell you, by the time they get to 9 p.m., when they're getting ready to go to bed, almost 80% of what you've taught them is gone. So part of your coaching methodology has to include the other two components. You have to hardwire it. You have to say, okay, my competition is the other stimuli that my client's brain is consuming. And so a nighttime routine is so critical to give your clients so that they can store it. So that's part two. And then you have to teach them some type of a hook that says, oh, okay, when I'm in this situation, how am I going to make it easy for my brain to remember what it is that you have taught me to do? I work with a lot of golf instructors. So these are people that do golf swings, which I'm not qualified to do. Over and over and again, they tell me, oh my God, I'm giving the same lesson over and over again. We're working on the same backswing position. We're working on the same weight transfer, or this, like it's over and over and over again. And it's not their fault. It's the human condition that all of us are in now. Our brains are consuming way too much stimuli. Most human beings that ever walked the face of this earth never traveled more than 50 miles from where they were born. Same stimuli, same threats. Today, we're carrying generations of stimuli on our phones wherever we go, and we consume all of that in about 30 minutes. So the brain is saturated. It's completely saturated. That's why we can only focus on something for about 3 seconds. That's why I'm saying, if you are a coach or a performance coach, you cannot ignore the mental health side of your practice. So I'll pause here now. Those were the topics that I was going to cover, Karl, and now we can open it up to, I didn't read any of the questions, but any topic that I covered, I'm more than happy to dig deep.
There's one direct question that's just come in. Is it relating to what you've just been talking about from Eric? I think it was maybe not Eric, Brugia. If he says if we cannot hold a target in the mind at the same time as a swing thought, how do we improve?
What a great question. That's a brilliant question. And I always tell people to have a sequence. You don't have to choose between the two, but to have a sequence. All right. The swing thought always comes first, and the target always comes last. Target is the king. I don't care what anybody says. I will fight you on this. Golf is a target sport. The intention is to send the ball there, wherever your there is. So the target, it's okay to have a swing thought. You just don't want to have a swing thought when you're hitting the ball. When you're hitting the ball, the target must be playing. And your body will naturally do what it needs to do based on your skill level and your training. So think of it as a sequence. Allow yourself to have whatever technical or pre-shot, whatever thing that you do, but the dominant thought when you're over the ball and there's 3 seconds or 5 seconds to go, chipping, putting, must be the target. And remember, the target can be anything. It can be trajectory, it can be landing spot, it can be ball flight, it can be curvature, it can be a cloud, it can be a bunker, it can be a tree. I don't care. The brain doesn't care. It doesn't. It just wants something to send the ball to. So sequence it.
I think also what's worth mentioning with this as well is that, as we alluded to earlier on, that the duration of the golf swing is an eternity for the mind. What you're saying there is that to sort of pre-programming a swing thought. The problem with swing thoughts, as I've experienced with many players over the years, is a swing thought in itself can't hold your attention for the duration of the swing. So if I have a takeaway thought, I do the takeaway and there's a huge gap now between takeaway and the rest of the golf swing, or if I have a transition thought or whatever it may be. However, you can actually hold the target for the entire duration of the swing. So the mind is actually occupied for the entire duration of the swing.
So let me explain what you just said in a neuroscientific way, because you're right, but let me give you the neuroscience behind it. Okay. A target, and I just tweeted about it this morning. You can follow me on Twitter at Izzy Justice. So ironically, this morning, I tweeted about this. A target is in the present moment. And every shot in golf has a different target, right? And a present moment, in most cases, does not have a judgmental value. It's just a flag. It's just a bunker. It's just a tree. It's just a spot on the green. A swing thought has an enormous amount of coordination. So in order for your brain to remember to take a backswing here, or to swing thoughts inherently have a higher brain frequency associated with them, because there's a logical, sequential, mechanical component to it. It's a position, it's a rotation, it's a weight transfer kind of a thing. It's a grip type of a thing. So the nature of the thoughts themselves, a swing thought carries higher brain quantity, whereas a target has no judgment to it. It's just there. What is a cloud? It's just a cloud. It's not good, bad. What is a tree? What is the left side of the pin, or the right side of the pin, or short? It's just a place. That place has not judged you. That place has not harmed you. So this is why swing thoughts carry with them a much higher brain frequency, which is why I say do it first. Because sometimes it can be helpful, especially if you're learning something, to say, okay, this is what I want to do. Even when I play, I typically try to have one and never more than one, because one is enough. It's enough of a brain spike. And I'll just pick one. So that's the other thing I would say, is that you should never have more than one. But irrespective of how many you have, your thought when you're over the ball, what should be playing in your monologue is where the ball is going, the trajectory, the landing spot, whatever it is.
Another question. This was from Matt Law. Again, ties in with this. Matt's just said, what would an ideal practice session or training session look like?
For what? For putting or short game, or what?
I think if we go with the long game, what would it look like for the long game?
Okay, very good, very good. So I would come up with the 3-ball maximum, right? And I'll tell you a great story. There's a PGA Tour player. Actually, he's from the UK. I'll leave it at that. And I went and followed him at a tournament, and he had his swing coach with him. And again, this is not a knock on swing coaches, but in his warm up, they were doing video work on the range, and I didn't like that, but I didn't say anything. And he played a bad round. And the next warm up, I said, hey, tomorrow, don't do any swing thoughts. And I want your last 10 shots to be very fun, very creative shots. And he said, like what? And I said, well, tell your caddy, hit a driver that's never leaves 10 feet above the ground. Hit a high hook, a high fade. Like, train your mind to send the ball to a target. So a good practice to me is never hit more than 3 balls to a target, right? And change the target every 3 balls. Because that will force your mind to say, okay, if I've changed the target, I now have a new target that I have to go to. So I know a lot of people say, well, one day you should hit odd irons, or next day even irons. I say hit no more than 3 shots with each club, but shape them, send them to a target that you are looking for. And that'll force your mind, because you have a different club. Because you have a different club, your mind wandering is going to go down. Like I said, your number one competition when you're practicing is your mind wandering. Right? So this is a human condition. This is not a flaw. This is nobody's. Because our minds wander 65% of the time does not mean there's something wrong with you. My mind wanders 65% of the time. I'll prove it to you. Go listen to your favorite song. After this webinar, go turn on your favorite song, whatever it is, from whatever genre, And C, just tap yourself like that on your hand every time that another thought enters your head and you're not listening to the lyrics of it. I guarantee you'll have a bruise by the end of the song. Right? So address the real competition in practice, which is your mind wandering. And you can do that by changing your clubs every 3 balls. You can go back to the club after 4 or 5 clubs, but switch it around and create different targets, whatever they may be.
I think it would be good actually to do a couple of live questions. So if anybody's got a question that they want to ask Izzy, if you just, hopefully there'll not be an avalanche all at once, but if you just unmute yourself and ask a question, whatever's on your mind, I think it'll be good interaction with such a
Sure.
sizable group.
Hi, it's Tim. Karl.
Hi, Tim.
Thanks so much. Really, really interesting. As regard the target is obviously really important. Why don't more people do heads-up putting, i.e. looking at the hole? I do it and I find it really helpful, but I don't use it for short putts. I think it may just move my body off alignment, but why doesn't, like the basketball hoop, why not look at the hole?
Yeah, okay, so that's another very, very good question, because frankly, in golf, you have 2 targets. So you have to put that club head onto the ball. And then you have to send that ball. So you have to connect 2 targets. But that's why I'm saying, that the dominant of the 2 targets is the other target. Basketball is different because you don't have 2 targets. I have worked with many, many, many basketball players and coaches. And when I teach them, I actually take different colored tapes and I put it on the rim, blue, yellow, pink. So when I go work with basketball, even at the NBA level, I color the rim. And sometimes players struggle with their shot. And I say, okay, I want you to hit the ball going into the blue tape, into the red tape. And suddenly there's something in their mind and they stop thinking about how high they have to jump, their arc, because the basketball coach is saying, okay, hey, jump and let your wrist go or let your elbow go higher. It's all this mechanical stuff again. And in a reactionary sport like that, where in seconds you have to move quickly, if they have a target in their head. So it's different. There aren't 2 targets in basketball, but in golf, there are 2 targets. If you hitting the center of the ball, especially when you're putting, and Tiger, I think, always says that for him, the most important part, this is for him, he says that the most important part for him in putting is to hit the ball in the center of his putter head.
Okay, thank you. Really interesting. Thanks, Izzy.
So Tim,
Izzy, if I may,
you have to learn to teach your brain to hold a target while not looking at it. This is a learnable skill. This can be taught. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Izzy, if I may, a question, please. Hello?
Sure. Yes, go ahead, sir.
And Karl, thank you both. I have been playing my game on a performance focus of total clarity of or visualizing the target, but I have also paralleled it with a constant belief that my swing is shaped on the basis of the desired set point in the backswing, transition if you like, with a settled feeling, and then right through to target. That might sound complicated, but if I summarize, I have a vision of the target clear in my mind, and on the periphery, I have this strong, constant feeling on every shot, that's my attempt, that I am moving to the appropriate transition point, settling, and then releasing. I hope that's clear.
I'm sorry, what's your question? I don't understand.
Well, I'm trying to combine a target focus with a swing thought.
Yes, so I'm okay with that. Somebody asked the question earlier. This is an oldie. I did not invent this, but I know back in the old days, a lot of coaches would have the player go to the back of their swing, and at the back of their swing, they would say, "Hit me a draw, hit me a fade, or hit me, a low, knuckleball kind of thing." And then the player would have to change something in their mechanics to hit the shot that they didn't know what the coach was going to say. So again, I think that if the target is playing in your head as you're coming down to the ball, and again, I've seen this with my brain track men, that really the moment of truth, if you want to get very specific, is from the backstroke down, is from the backswing down. That's the moment of truth. The moment of truth is not when you strike the ball. It's too late by then. But on your downswing, whether it's the putter or the chip, if it's clear, if it's playing in your head where the target is, whether you're landing the ball or shaping the ball, that's when it works really well.
Thank you. Excellent. Superb evening. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, John. Another really relevant question here, Izzy, I think, is from Michael. He's talking about that virtually all of the psychology books will say that you need to pick a really small target. But my experience has been that can actually create a lot of tension in people and increase brain activity. That I've had reasonable amount of success with a number of players is, yes, having a specific target, but changing the frame of reference to a more of a channel, a little bit wider target to go to. It's specific, but a wider target. What's your thoughts on that from a brain perspective?
Yeah, so I agree and I disagree. So, one of the things that I've been teaching my son a lot is not whether the target should be small or big or this or that. So what makes golf a unique sport is that it is in a geospatially different location. It's not like basketball or soccer or any sport where you're in the same location. That means that on any given day, on any given hole, on any given shot, the target what matters the most is what is the target that your brain can hold. Sometimes it's a small one. Sometimes it's a big one. Sometimes it's a cloud. Sometimes it's a bunker. Sometimes it's the back of the cup. Sometimes it's the entry point. So don't become a slave to any target. Become a slave that when you're over this particular shot, there might be 3 targets out there, but which is the one that's easiest for your brain to hold? This is why the other gentleman that just asked me that question, whatever target you feel like your brain can hold, that's the right target.
So that buys in, that's again compatible with the idea of flexibility and adaptability on any given day to where you are. And we talked about this in the putting podcast, didn't we? That, some people say that you must have a line on the golf ball, and other people say, well, I put better without the line. But again, what you're reinforcing is that there's space for both, even on a given day, that you can actually, wherever you are on a particular day and wherever the brainwave frequencies are, you're able to adapt with a series of tools.
I think the bigger danger is to be a slave to one type of target.
Yeah.
That's the bigger danger. Don't do that. Even in putting. Sometimes you want to hear the ball go in. Sometimes you want to see the ball go in. Sometimes it's a straight line. Sometimes it's not even the hole. It's something left of it or right of it. Or sometimes there's a pitch mark where you want to land your ball. Conveniently, someone had a pitch mark there. Oh, so there's a target I can hold. Sometimes it's somebody else's coin somewhere else. So this is another thing that you can learn is, allow your brain to do its magic. The brain is phenomenal. It can do anything. Don't constrict it to, just 1 or 2 types of things.
Great. Any other questions? I know, Matt, you put your hand up. Matt Law, have you still got the question, Matt, or has it been answered?
Thanks, Karl. Izzy, would you advise actually having the physical cards pocket, like the red, yellow, and green?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Could you please repeat?
Do you want to put your video on, Matt? Just put your video on.
Okay.
Your voice line's breaking up.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Izzy, would you recommend having the physical cards in your pocket, the red, yellow, and green?
100%. 100%. Absolutely. And let me tell you why, Matt. When you're playing golf, your brain, and this is in all sports, competition makes everything, the one probably most common thing from a brain perspective that people tell me in all sports is that everything seems faster in competition. Well, if you think about it, 1 second is 1 second, whether you're practicing, playing with your friends, or in competition. So the unit of time does not change. but it feels faster because the quantity of brain waves that are in your head are a lot higher. When the quantity of brain waves in your brain is higher, you are not going to remember things that you know how to do because there's competition in your internal Google engine. So by writing them down and having them in your yardage book or in the back of your pocket is a very good thing. It's a very, very good thing. That way you take the memory part of it out. And so I do recommend, there's an app out there, a Jira app, so you cannot use that in competition, but in non-competition, it automatically loads everything for you. So that when you do go play in a real round, you can't use the app obviously, but then when you use the cards, it's a very easy brain training.
Thank you.
Jim, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Izzy, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is just a more general question. It came from sort of listening to what you've talked about and the podcast with Karl. When I was at the Commonwealth Games, I saw the table tennis players were G'ing themselves up a lot. So they were trying to actually increase, looked like they were trying to increase their arousal levels or increase their brain waves. So are we saying now that that's a negative? I mean, to apply it to golf, you could say, would that be a negative if you were trying to hit the ball a long way on a long drive or whatever? Are we always trying to reduce brain frequencies?
Very, very good question. So there is something different with that. So I'll give you multiple answers. So table tennis or ping pong is a reactionary sport, right? Whereas golf is not. So in a reactionary sport, the stimuli of what the other player is doing, because it's happening so fast, is your target. It's wherever he or she on the other end of the table is doing. And it's the same thing with other sports where someone is playing defense against you. Their movement is the automatic position of where you are. Number two, a lot of rah, rah, rah. There's a difference between positive rah, rah, rah and negative rah, rah, rah. So I can say, you got this, keep going. And in fact, what I'm doing is I am lowering. You're not increasing the brain waves. So I used to do Ironmans. I've done 15 of them. And I used to see signs, because it's a very lonely sport because you're gone all day long. But in the marathon portion of the Ironman, especially towards the end, a lot of families have signs, go mom, go dad, you got this, almost done. And I would see those and, it would pump me up. And then I would see my own family and suddenly everything changed. Like 500 people yelling, you got this, go. And my daughter saying, hey, dad, keep going. There was no comparison between those two in my brain. Clearly, what my daughter said to me emotionally, cognitively meant so much to me. Let me say one last thing, and this is very important. I work with a NASCAR driver, and he was arguing with me on this very point that you brought up. And he said, doctor, when I am angry in my car, in my NASCAR car, going at 200 miles an hour, that's when I perform my best. And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, when I'm angry and I want to beat that car in front of me, I can see holes making. And I said, oh, okay, so you're using what you're calling anger to get to green, to get to alpha theta mode. And then I said, and his wife was there with me when he had this particular conversation. I said, so when do you turn it off? And he paused. And so this particular driver came to see me because he's one of the most talented drivers, but he's also the most hated driver. Nobody likes him. Sponsors don't like him. Fans don't like him because he doesn't know when to turn it off. So yes, there are certain cases in certain sports where being angry forces them to be very, very focused. But I'm telling you, that is a very expensive way. There are coaches who rule by fear. And if you do something wrong, you get benched. And yes, that can be a motivator, but that is a very expensive motivator.
Brilliant.
And you don't need to do that.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
You got it.
Izzy, can you give an example of a post-shot routine?
Sure. Okay. So it's actually in the app. So I find that words are very judgmental. So most pro shot, first of all of you have one. It's a subconscious one. Your brain is judging the shot that you hit. The judgment that currently occurs is a verbal one. Good, bad, I suck. Oh, that was good. It's always a verbal one. So to me, what I encourage people to do is replace the verbal with a number. And that number is from 0 to 10, so 1 to 10. Right? Now, why numbers? Well, because numbers are non-judgmental. They don't have so much history associated with them. Now, a star or a 1 is you hit the shot exactly like you wanted to. A 10 was that the shot was completely different from what you wanted to. So by giving your shot a number, that number then tells you what adjustment that you have to make. If you hit a shot that's a 3, then the adjustment that you have to make before you get to the next shot is relatively minor. If you hit a 10, well, you got to do a lot of work. So the number is not just a label, but it's a direction of what you have to do before you get to the next shot. So all of this is in that app. It actually teaches you how to score a shot. And that's why I go back to the course management is if any one of your last 3 to 5 shots were above 4, that means you are yellow or red. And that means you don't want to be aggressive on your next shot. Because that's where I find people make bogeys and double bogeys, is they hit shots that they know they're capable of, but their sequence, their force, or their target is off. And they don't know why. And so they make things worse. So a good poor shot routine is give it a number, and based on that number, you make the adjustment before you go to the next shot. And the great thing about golf, unlike most sport, is that after every shot, you basically have a timeout. You have a de facto timeout. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes before you walk or go to your next ball, or you got to wait for other guys to hit. So take advantage of that.
The other good thing that you can do with that as well is, I think it's ties in with this, and I've suggested to players is that if you go out there and you grade your shots from 1 to 10, you can go out with the goal of just accumulating as many 1s and 2s as possible. And that's a really rather than when you focused, absorb too much on the score, there's a fear of losing something. When you go out with the intention of acquiring as many 1s, 2s, and 3s in terms of the shots as possible, you're acquiring something, you're moving towards something rather than avoiding something.
Yes, and I can even, what you said is what I say, but there's one more thing that I say. And I said this to the kid last week who shot 65 to get into the Canadian event, and then he finished top 20. And on his last day, on the run on Sunday, he was, I think, in 15th place or something like that. And I said, your only goal on this last round is whatever shot you hit, the next shot should be lower. If you hit a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, your only goal is on the next shot, make it less than that. So change your focus, give yourself something you can hold. Just tell yourself, this shot will not be worse in terms of the 1 to 10 than the other. Mm-hmm. So I find that, and what he said to me afterwards, he says, oh, instead of a cliche like stay in the moment or one shot at a time, that gave me something to do. And that's why and on the Canadian tour, if you finish top 20, you get to the next tournament. So he's playing next week. And he was the only amateur in the field.
Dina, you've got your hand up. Good to see you.
And you, Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Thanks, Karl, for putting this together, and thanks for letting me speak. And Izzy, I listened to your podcast last week, and I can safely say it's the best I've putted in a good few years. So thank you so much. I've just got a question, because I think the mindfulness stuff that we've done with Karl and Vin has been brilliant for holding the target in mind. And I managed to do it really well with putting, chipping and pitching. But for some reason, when I'm hitting a full shot, I just can't do it. As in, when I'm target focused while swinging, I seem to hit the ball more wayward than I do if I have a swing cue. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that, or whether it's just a case of more practice is needed.
No, again, I'll go back to what I said earlier, is I would not choose between the two, because I think they're both helpful. I would turn it into a sequence. Allow yourself to have your swing thought, and then say, after I have decided what I want to do with this, I want to hit a cut, I want to hit a draw, I want to hit it left edge, I want to hit it right side, is once you've done that, then say, okay, this is my target. The other thing I would say to you is what Karl said earlier. If you're telling me that the target for you works very well in your short game and not in your long game, then let's go back to what Karl said, which is make your target a lot smaller. And there's the trick that I use, and I can teach it to you right now. If you take your hands and join them like this, okay? Now take your hand and stretch it all the way out, okay? Now look at the border that your arms create. See that border? All right, so now there's a box over here. So literally, you'll look very goofy when you play, but you can do that and create a box over where your target is and tell your brain, this is the world I'm going to live in. Right? So typically, if you're hitting a green, I want the bottom of your hands behind the flag.
Okay.
That way the flag is sort of right there, all right? But that's a good way. In your case, you can make a box and say, my entire brain is going to live in this box. And if you're on the tee box, it's basically a border. Our brain loves borders. Think about it. A door is a border. A car is a border. When you're walking on the side path, there's a concrete pathway there. There's a stop sign. There's a zebra crossing. Everything, our brain loves it when it has a boundary, because it gives it this parameter. A window has a border. Everything that we function in has a border. So you can give yourself that, and it's perfectly legal. It's going to look goofy, but I often tell my own son that, one of his tricks after he hits a 5 or 6 or 7 shot, on the next shot, I have him do that. And he says, it just makes his world from all over the place to just there.
Brilliant. Because I'm really sorry. In my head, I thought this was 6 o'clock. And so I've been planning my day around 6 o'clock. So I've missed a lot of what you've said. So I'm really sorry if you've had to repeat yourself there.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's completely fine. But in your case, you should make your targets much, much smaller.
Much, much smaller. Okay. And just remind me, sorry, the 7, 6, 7, 8 is a good shot or a bad shot?
Okay. So it's a scale from 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And it's basically a surprise. Remember, the brain does not like surprises. What is the definition of a surprise? Something you did not expect. If you have a surprise in competition, your brain is going to do exactly what it is designed to do. It's going to try to solve that surprise. While it's solving that surprise, you have suddenly lost the target. You have suddenly lost where you are. Okay. So it's good to have a measure of what your EEG is. So I had to figure out a system where I had to teach people how to be able to measure their own EEG without the device on. Again, this happened by accident. I did not go out and say, okay, let me create a system. But I found that basically a star or 1, 2, 3 means the surprise is low. If the surprise is low, the mind wandering is low. If the surprise is high, then the mind wandering is high, because you're trying to figure out, well, where in the world did that come from, right? So that's called the GYRA system, GYRA, green, yellow, red. And so that's the number there. And it's in my book, and it's also on GYRAGolf.com.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
The good news is, Tina, even though you were an hour late, is that it's being recorded tonight. So you'll get the recording, so you'll be all right.
Thanks, Karl. It'd be good to see you too.
two shot penalty for being late on the tee. One more question. Conscious of time, Michael, you've had your hand up.
We can go with the guy with the hat on as well.
Yeah, Michael, you need to unmute yourself.
There we go. All right. Yeah, we're going back. I've been doing been keeping a separate gyro scorecard now, I guess, for about 6 weeks. I think it's fantastic. I think it's wonderful in that it totally ties in with all of Karl's stuff in terms of it helps you stay present for the next shot. It's like an extra incentive to stay present. But when we're going back to the A portion of it, and I think a valuable tool as well is when you post-round analyze your numbers, you realize how few 7, 8, 9s there really are, and you may be closer than you really think you are to playing good golf anyway. So I think it can be very productive in getting yourself feeling better after maybe a 76 or whatever your bad number is.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, to me, that as a performance coach, which I think most of you are, I don't know, but there has to be a way that you can track where someone's mind was during the course of the round. And unless you have an EEG machine or a brain trackman like mine, there's no way of doing that. And even if I have one, I cannot put it in a competitive round. I can put it in a different round. So the scores that they give you a good clue, and you can see patterns. Are the high numbers in the beginning of the round, at the end of the round, in the middle of the round? And then you can make the right, if it's at the beginning of the round, that means their warm-up wasn't very good. So you got to change the way that they warm up. If it's at the back of the round, that means their endurance isn't very good. Their mental endurance isn't very good. So it gives you as a performance coach to zone in on what the real problems are. We can do one more question from Eric.
And I think as a player, it gives you a way of monitoring your progress too. So I think this comes back to other podcasts that stressing the importance of journaling your progress.
Yes.
Keeping a record of all these numbers, so you can go back maybe 6 months from now and go, oh, fantastic, a lot more 2s, 3s, 4s versus 6, 7s, and 8s.
Right. So remember, in golf, you have 3 competitors in this order. Number 1, or number 3, I should say, is your competition. Number 2 is the golf course, and number 1 is you.
Yeah.
You really have to beat yourself. Well, how do you beat yourself? Because that's a cliche. Well, you beat yourself by, again, keeping your scores between 0 and 5, because now you have put yourself in alpha, theta, green mode. And that's the real competition, to be honest with you. When my text messages blow up from my clients, they don't blow up because someone beat them. They blow up because they beat themselves. And they're mad and they're angry. Eric?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to go back to the swing thought target sequence. What is the time frame of that sequence? Like specifically, can we hold the swing thought up until the backswing and then switch to the target on the downswing? Is that?
Yeah. So again, I understand the question that you're asking me, and I'm going to give you an answer that though truthful is not a good one in my opinion. So I don't think you should try to hold a swing thought as you're hitting the ball. Because, so again, this is not me personally. What the device has shown me is that a swing thought carries with it a very higher frequency inherently. That's number 1. Number 2, a lot of your swing thoughts are going to be largely predicated on your last shot. It doesn't matter what your swing thought is over one particular shot. If your last 2 or 3 shots were 7s and 8s or 9s or 5s or those kinds of shots, then your brain's ability to remember that swing thought is inherently compromised. That's why I'm saying don't become a slave to the mechanics of it. The king should always be the target. But there are too many variables to give you a good answer. But basically, and this is not just with swing thought, with any thought, your brain cannot remember a thought if it's yellow or red. It just won't. So even though you may do this as a backswing position, it will forget it in an instant because it can't remember it. But if you're green, it can. Because there's too much competition in the brain because it's processing the last surprise. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I can give you maybe a specific example. Like this morning, I was on the range and I have a game. We have posts that are about 35 yards apart on either side. And my game is I just go through my irons, and even, well, it expands as the clubs get longer, but I'll hit 9-iron. If it gets in within the 35 yards, I'll go up to 8. I'll hit the 8. If I miss the 8, I'll go back down to the 9, if that makes sense. And I'm just trying to get it in this 35-yard wide target. And I was really struggling. And then I came, my only thought towards the end was I just tried to feel the club face at the top of the backswing. That was my only swing thought, I guess. And then after I got that in my head, it's just like I whipped through it like it was nothing.
Yeah, so I really truly, and again, I am saying this with a genuine spirit of collaboration, but be very careful of the placebo effect. A lot of times, there's the causation correlation, Karl, that you talk about a lot. Sometimes a new swing thought actually puts you in green, but it's not because of the swing thought, it was because it's just something different. I would argue with you that the reason you were missing those 8 and 9 irons was because your mind was wandering a lot during that time. You probably had a lot of activity in your brain. And again, I'm guessing here, I'm not being judgmental from maybe last night, yesterday, or the other things that you have to do after your stuff. This is why I really insist that, if you're going to go practice, make sure that you insert every 5 minutes at the most time for you to stop swinging, stop hitting, and allow yourself to make sure that you know where your brain temperature is.
Okay.
Because you can end up fixing the wrong thing. In that instant, and again, I don't know, I was not there, but I've seen this happen too many times. I've seen it happen so many times. My first client was a guy who saw he was a PGA Tour player who saw every major instructor. And once I started working with him, he said he was at age 44. He was already pretty much done with the PGA Tour. He said the biggest mistake that he made was that every time his swing let him down, there's a cliche, within a year or two, he would go see another instructor, and then a year to another instructor, and then a year to another instructor. And he said all the while he was fixing the wrong thing. He was your average player. He had to go back to Q school and get his card again, and he just had so much noise in his head that noise was causing the manifestation of poor swings. So I know many of you will disagree with me on this, but I think swing mechanics are very important. But I will tell you, they're not as important as many think. The most important part is, where is your brain and can you hold a target? It is amazing how your body will naturally do what you want to do with the ball, especially if you're capable of it. If simply you have a very good target and your brain waves are in that 5 to 15 hertz.
Izzy, it's been a tremendous session. I'm sure everybody would agree. Some amazing information. I think, as I said at the beginning, it's an exciting period of time. I think we're at the start of a golden age of neuroscience, and I think any coach, any player who avails himself of this information, becomes curious about it. I think the opportunity for performance coaching going forward is just incredible. And we didn't get a chance to touch on it tonight, but maybe looking at the hour model of coaching and adjusting that where possible. But thanks ever so much, Izzy, for your input tonight. Where can people find out more about Gira Golf and the things that you do? And
well, thank you. Yeah, you can go to our website, which is giragolf.com. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, Dr. Izzy Justice, on TikTok as well as at Izzy Justice. Thank you so much for Karl for having me, for all of you for joining me, and I wish all of you to be green, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that, thanks for everybody for coming along tonight. You'll get a copy of the recording probably at some point in next week. If you know of anybody who wants to have a look at that, we can certainly, if you just get the emails over, we can do that. I know there's a bunch of Mind Factor coaches on the session tonight, so thanks for thanks for joining us with that. If you want to come along in November to the Mind Factor certification, it's a great 3 days. If you're interested in furthering your knowledge on that. So thanks again for everybody. Stay cool in the extreme temperatures that we've got at the moment. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and any feedback, as long as it's good feedback, we'll be most welcome from the session tonight. So thanks everybody, all the best.